Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're going to be continuing the series on the body recomp series and the 8-week summer shred series and talking specifically about if your calories are too low. I see this very commonly when it comes to training women and looking at their overall calories because we've been told over the years to eat as little as possible to see the best results. And it's been damaging information for a lot of women. So I want to dive into how to determine if your calories are too low, if you are chronically undereating, and if your caloric deficit is causing you to actually not see results, and how you should fix it. So there's some key indicators that determine if your calories are too low and you're undereating either on macros or on overall calories. And we're going to kind of dive into each one of them today and talk about how you can shift out of this and ensure that you're on the right plan to see success when you are trying to lean out and get more toned and confident. So let's dive into it. What is really happening when you are in a caloric deficit? I think that this piece is misunderstood the most because especially women have been told that if you eat less, you'll lose weight. And while that is true, it is not necessarily the end all be all for getting the results that you, in my professional opinion, in working with hundreds of women over the years, is that it generally comes down to the fact that food has been demonized to a way that you're not viewing it properly. And it causes you to have this relationship with food where you now are focused on the wrong things. You aren't focusing on it nutritionally fueling you and how it's actually used as an energy source to support you. And I can honestly say from the women that I've talked to and the women that have seen success in following the right plan and following the right strategy, that it really does come down to understanding what the strategic approach is for you and not just focusing on eating as little as possible. Because in that old mindset of eating as little as possible, being restrictive, working out as hard as you possibly can, you're not happy. You're not seeing the results you want. You're chronically burnt out. You're chronically fatigued. Your sleep is awful. Your hormones feel all over the place. And you don't have the body mass or you don't have the look and physique that you want anyways. So it's not working. It hasn't worked for years. And yet it's something that so many women are still trapped in that mindset of, and they don't fully understand how to get out of it or what they need to be focusing on. So I kind of want to break that down today, understanding where your caloric deficit needs to be, understanding where that can happen and why decreasing your calories to as little as possible isn't the answer, and that eating as little as possible and only focusing on the calorie component isn't going to get the results that you want. It's a mix of a few things, and it's ensuring that you have the right strategic approach and you're not just trying the most restrictive plan, hoping that you're going to lose weight in 6 weeks and that you're going to maintain it the rest of your life. That's just not how it works. And I think years and years of women doing that and years of other plans that have been more strategic and seeing how women have achieved results, it has proven time and time again that is not the strategy. It does take time, but there are ways that you can manipulate what you're doing and using the science behind what actually works to ensure that you get results. So I want to talk a little bit about all of that today and specifically talking about when to identify when your calories are too low and the shift that you need to make. So some of the signs that your calories are too low and things that are happening when you decrease your calories in a caloric deficit, your entire goal is to lose weight. When you do it from a calorie standpoint only, you will lose weight if you are truly in a calorie deficit. Calories are energy. The energy that you consume is going to be used or stored. That is how it works. And that is how your body looks at food when it comes in. Doesn't necessarily matter where it comes from, but the breakdown of the calories that come in matter as well. So if you're in a caloric deficit and you want to lose weight, if you stick to that caloric deficit, you will lose weight. The caveat to that is just because you're eating a certain number of calories that are in a calorie deficit does not mean that you will lose the weight that you want. So it does not mean that if you are under eating on protein that you will lose body fat. It will likely mean that you will lose water weight and you will lose muscle mass. If you are eating the wrong structure and makeup of your nutrition and of your calories, it does not correlate to the results that you want. So just eating as little as possible doesn't mean that you're going to get that lean into a physique. You might be losing muscle mass in the process. There might be a lot of muscle wasting in the process. You might be slowing down your metabolism and the overall amount of energy that your body is using if you're doing it for a long period of time. And there are negatives to eating in a caloric deficit if you're not structured enough and if you don't know what you're doing. And I see this time and time again where somebody eats in a caloric deficit for a long period of time and then they just stay there. And once they get to that range, their hunger decreases, their energy decreases, and their metabolism has slowed down because your body is adaptive. When you are in a caloric deficit, your body signals that, especially if it's something that's repeated. But if it's something that's repeated and it's repeated for a long period of time, your body understands that it's now getting less energy than it's it's used to. And so then it slows down the need to take as much energy that it might have before. So you were potentially using more energy at a higher rate when you had more calories. And now that you've lowered it down, it has drastically decreased the amount that it's using or the pace at which it's using it, because it knows that it's not going to get as much and it needs to slow things down instead of using it as frequently. This can affect your hormones. This can affect your energy. This can affect your overall sleep and recovery. And that is a negative impact of having a slower metabolism and eating too calorically low for a long period of time. Now, this won't happen in a short period of time, but this will happen if you do it for long periods of time. And I've had clients before that have come in that have gone into a deficit or restrictive phase and they've stayed there for years because it's the only thing they knew how to do to maintain the weight. And over time, they noticed that eating at that range, they still saw the weight increase or they started to see changes happening. There was nothing that they could really do because they were already calorically too low. And now their body was reacting to that. So why does that even happen? What happens is your metabolism slows down, like we talked about, and it uses less energy. When that happens, generally when you're a caloric deficit that's lower, your fat content is lower, so hormones are going to take a hit there. Hormones take a hit there. Your carbs are going to be potentially lower, which is going to affect your overall energy levels. And long-term effects of that can affect your metabolism, can affect your overall energy. And signs that I see are often they're tired all of the time. They feel like they have a 2 p.m. crash nonstop. They wake up exhausted no matter how much sleep that they get. Their cravings are constant and they feel like they increase over time. Their sleep quality has dropped significantly. They feel irritable consistently. Recovery seems to get worse. They're always fatigued. They're always sore. And these are signs that you're chronically under eating and that you have been for a long period of time that you need to look at and look at your overall health of your metabolism to determine what to do next. And if you're already saying I'm eating 1,200 calories and I have been for a long time, you're more than likely in that category and you need to evaluate what needs to happen to your nutrition and how you're going to increase it over time or how you're going to structurally change it so that you can see better results. Generally, the first sign that I see when this happens or the first frustration for most is fat loss stops. And no matter what they're doing, no matter how much they're working out, how little they eat, they can't seem to lose the weight. And it's because your body is not in a stage that is primed for fat loss. Something that I think that is totally misunderstood and not looked at enough is priming your body for a fat loss state. If you want to lose fat, you need to do it strategically, not just focusing on eating as little as possible and working out as much as possible, because sometimes your body does not respond in fat loss because stored fat is something that it can use for energy later. So your body's not trying to be in a place where it's going to be as lean as possible and it has nothing to use later in life. Its entire goal is to protect you. If it's been in a place too long that's been stressed and not in a place that has enough energy for what it needs, it's not going to prioritize losing more weight. So you have to prime your body to be in a place that's established for fat loss. And that doesn't mean that's going to be a long period of time. It just means that you have to strategically change your nutrition and your training so that your body trusts you again and it gets into a place where it's ready to shed body fat and ensure that it has more muscle mass. And muscle requires more energy than body fat. So you might find that you have less muscle mass and more body fat, or at least less muscle mass over time when you're in a caloric deficit because it doesn't have enough energy to sustain it. So you have to ensure that you're eating enough calorically as well as enough of the proteins that are needed to sustain and build muscle mass. So when I see this happening, a lot of times these women will come to me saying they want to body recomp, but they're in already too low of a caloric range, which is not physically possible to have a body recomp, or it's at least much more challenging for it to occur because a body recomp is ensuring that you are preserving and building muscle mass over time through training, and that requires energy. And if you are calorically too low or your metabolism has slowed down, that's not the shift that's going to be happening. A lot of times we see a plateau or we see things increase in terms of digestion issues, bloating, and less fat loss, and feeling a little bit more puffy or overall skinny fat, then we do see changes in the right direction. And sometimes that change needs to happen by changing macros to a more strategic caloric deficit versus the lowest range that you're at, and changing yourself from being too calorically low to structuring your nutrition to be more focused on protein, focused on enough carbohydrates, enough healthy fats to balance your hormones, and enough calories to still be in a deficit, but not too low that causes you to have the negative effects and potentially lose muscle mass that you've built and prevent you from sustaining it long term. When the calories get too low, the body becomes less willing to maintain muscle mass because it requires too much energy to do so. And it's a source that it can use in order for energy at that time. So it's going to do so. And there's a lot of research that has been done that shows that the more aggressive a caloric deficit is for a long period of time, the harder it is for you to maintain and sustain muscle mass. So you want to ensure that you are in a caloric deficit if you're trying to recomp or if you're trying to lose weight, but it's strategic and it's not as low as you possibly can go. And then you're focused on the macro profile of your nutrition, as well as ensuring that you are in a supported caloric deficit that's going to help you lose weight, as well as sustaining muscle mass and feel energized without being too low. That's going to prevent you from seeing any results at all. And I think it's important to understand when you are too calorically low, you're not focused on the right things in terms of ensuring you're building muscle mass or sustaining muscle mass. You're going to have more of that skinny fat feel because you are going to be losing muscle mass more frequently. It's going to be drastically harder for you to maintain muscle mass over time. And the more muscle mass that you lose, the more your body composition changes, which gives more of that skinny fat, that puffy, and even that softer or weaker look that prevents you from feeling like what you're doing is working and feeling lost, that you're putting in effort, but you're not seeing results no matter what you do. On the other scale of that, there is the stress response that happens from eating too calorically low. Stress is stress to your body, and it doesn't really matter what kind of stress you're getting, whether it is stress from work, stress from your life, or stress from your diet. And that can happen from internal stress, that can come from emotional stress, that can come from physical stress. And one of the biggest things that people overlook is aggressive dieting is a form of stress to the body, because hard dieting itself is a stressor, especially if you are getting poor sleep, if you are doing excessive cardio, if you're under eating, you have high caffeine intake, and then you have environmental work stress or even physical stress on top of that. You're going to be stressing yourself out, stressing your adrenals out. And when your body's in a stress state, cortisol increases, and it's also in a fight or flight mode, which is in less of a fat loss state, meaning it's not primed for fat loss. When stress is chronically elevated and it causes cortisol to be chronically elevated, you're going to notice that it's going to change your sleep cycles. It's going to change your recovery, your ability to recover, your overall training performance, and even water retention. And it's why a lot of people feel puffy, inflamed, exhausted, and feeling like they just don't have any energy to do anything. And it's kind of this endless cycle of now you've been in a caloric deficit for so long that you have no energy, and that energy impacts your ability to work out or your consistency to work out. You're so exhausted from work that you can't get to the gym, you can't get your workout in, and you're so stressed from food that you're not able to understand what you should be eating. And there's so much food noise causing cravings to go through the roof, and then causing you to feel like you're in this endless binging cycle of restricting yourself, binging late at night, and then starting over either the next day or the next week. And that's where a lot of women get stuck, is because they're focused on the wrong component. They're eating too low long term, and it causes these cycles to occur, and it causes stress to happen, which then gives you this negative impact of feeling puffy, not seeing any results, but still putting in a ton of work and being frustrated because nothing seems to work. And it's because your strategy's off. And we talked about this in the overall body recomp episode. So if you haven't listened to that one, I would definitely go back and listen to the structure that you should be following in terms of your lifting split, the nutrition profile that you should have in order to kind of change these things, but to make sure that you are changing them into a way that's going to be either a proper deficit range or one that's going to give you enough energy that you can be lifting consistently and focusing on the right components for what you're going to be doing in your plan. And it kind of walks you through how to build out this plan based on what your goals are and where you're at. So if you're currently in a place where you're chronically under eating, your calories are drastically too low, then you need to address that part first. And you need to focus on a plan that's going to allow you to increase those calories slowly over time and to the right ranges so that you can prime your body for fat loss. That doesn't necessarily have to be a long period of time. It's going to be different for everyone based on how long that you've been there, how your body is responding overall, and how you're actually adhering to the plan consistently over time, because that's going to determine your weekly changes. You want to ensure that you're slowly increasing your calories over time, coming mostly from carbohydrates and protein, and then comparing that to kind of how you're eating right now. If you're in that binging cycle right now, it's important you kind of look at all data, because if your weekends are really thrown off, it's going to throw your weekly averages off. So you want to make sure that you're looking at the full picture. If you're constantly under eating, you eat the same things over and over again, you're going to have a different plan than somebody who eats Monday through Thursday really low calorie, and then the weekends add up to 7,000 calories, because that throws our weekly averages a little bit. And we just need a little bit more structure in how we're eating so that our cravings are calmed down. We're not finding ourselves constantly hungry and causing ourselves to binge. And we find a way to fuel our workouts so that our energy and our recovery is restored, so we can have proper strength training based workouts on a consistent basis with a progressive overload plan. If you haven't listened to that episode, definitely go back and listen to that Recomp episode because it's really helpful in identifying how to build out that plan and how you should apply these things into your plan to ensure that you're building muscle mass and losing body fat over time. So a few things I want to leave you with to identify if you're too low in your caloric ranges. First thing I would do is track kind of what you're eating on a consistent basis without changing anything. And I would get an understanding of where your nutrition profile really is, what your calories look like, but also what your macros look like. And if you're eating nutritionally enough, I would also track your water and ensure that you understand how much water you're drinking, if that's enough for you to sustain your energy throughout the day. And I would look at some of the signs that show that you're in a caloric deficit and kind of where you're struggling. First, you need to understand what your caloric ranges look like and be able to identify how long that might be going on and how long that might have been going on. If you can pinpoint that, that's going to be much more helpful and that's going to give you a better understanding of what to do next. I would say this does not pertain to everybody. Not everybody is chronically undereating. Most people, I would say, are overeating, but there are a few people that are definitely in deficits, have been there for too long, and don't understand what the signs are. So please take that with a grain of salt and make sure that you're actually looking at the data of what your tracking looks like, what your nutrition looks like, and don't just assume you're undereating. Some of the signs that says that you're undereating is constant fatigue, obsession with food or a lot of food noise, poor recovery, losing strength, constantly feeling like you're getting a little bit more puffy, overall stalled progress, and not seeing any benefits no matter how much change you make. Binging eating episodes, a lot of irritability, poor sleep quality, low motivation, or feeling cold constantly. Other things I see are changes in cycle or even loss of cycle completely. Those are big things that you need to look at to determine where you're at calorically and then evaluate that data based on the tracking data that you get. So biggest takeaway today is it's so important to understand your nutrition and make sure that your nutrition is tied to a bigger strategy of what you're trying to accomplish. Eating less, more restriction, training harder does not always equate to results. And it's important that when you're doing that, you're strategically adding that into your plan so that there is structure behind what you're doing and there is a true outcome aligned with the goal that you're chasing and with the habits that you're implementing, whether that's changes in your nutrition, a caloric deficit, changes in your training, and you're actually tracking that data to ensure that it's giving you the results you want, not just eating as little as possible and taking away and impacting your overall metabolism and energy. Because generally what happens is the less stress that your body is experiencing, the better recovery, which improves overall results and which improves your ability to build muscle mass and lose body fat. So sometimes priming your body for body fat loss and for building more muscle mass is the right approach before just cutting your calories even further. That can technically do more harm than good if you don't have the right approach to it. If you want some support with this, I have different ways where you can work with me or work together in helping you achieve these goals, and you can find all that information in the show notes down below. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I'll talk to you next week in the next episode.